You're here to relax, and I'm here to guide you. Before we begin, take a deep breath. Let go of everything that happened today. This moment is just for you. In the calm of the night, or the stillness of the early morning, wherever you are, I'd love to know, which city are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and it helps me feel closer to you, even across the distance. Now close your eyes if you'd like. Let's begin. It was 3:04 a.m. when my connecting flight out of Denver was delayed. Again, I'd been stranded in the airport since midnight, a casualty of bad weather and worse airline coordination. The terminal was nearly empty. Just a handful of passengers slumped in seats or curled up on their backpacks. The buzz of vending machines and the distant hum of a floor polisher were the only sounds. I wasn't tired, just numb. I'd been traveling for nearly 20 hours with 2 layovers and 1 canceled flight. My next leg wasn't until 6:10 a.m., and I wasn't about to pay for a hotel just for a few hours. So I stayed, waiting. That's when I first noticed the man by Gate C-17. Gate C-17 was technically closed. The monitors were off, the boarding desk unmanned. But he sat there anyway, 1 row from the windows, staring straight ahead. I wouldn't have paid him any attention if not for how still he was. Not asleep, not on his phone. Just sitting, perfectly upright, watching nothing. At first I thought he was a maintenance worker or a security guard. But he wasn't in uniform. Just a plain black jacket, dark jeans, and old sneakers. No bag, no drink, no phone. Something about it put me on edge. I walked around the concourse to stretch my legs. Every shop was closed. The lights above the seating areas were dimmed, casting long shadows across the carpeted floors. It felt less like an airport and more like a ghost town. When I passed Gate C-17 again, he was still there. This time, he was looking at me. Not just a glance. His head was turned, eyes locked. I looked away fast, heart suddenly thumping. I kept walking, telling myself I was being paranoid. But when I glanced over my shoulder, he was still watching. Around 3:30 a.m., I headed to the bathroom to splash water on my face and clear my head. The place was empty. Stalls open, lights buzzing overhead. I took my time trying to shake the creeping anxiety that had settled in my chest. When I stepped back out, the terminal seemed darker, quieter. And the man from Gate C-17 was gone. I scanned the concourse. Nothing. I told myself he must have left. Maybe his flight was rebooked. Maybe he moved to another gate. Anything but what my gut was suggesting. Then I noticed the reflection in the glass behind me. He was standing 20 feet away. I turned quickly, heart racing, breath catching in my throat. But the space behind me was empty, eerily, completely empty. Just the pale blue glow of recessed lighting on tile and rows of vacant chairs stretching into silence. I stood frozen for a moment, scanning the corridor again. Shadows clung to the corners, thick and unmoving. I half expected to see a figure leaning out from behind a column watching. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the air system and the far-off whine of cleaning equipment. Had I imagined it? The reflection in the glass had been so clear. Too clear. Maybe it was the angle, the lighting, the sheer exhaustion catching up with me. I rubbed my eyes hard, telling myself I was stressed, overtired. That had to be it. Still, my nerves buzzed like static as I turned and walked briskly back toward the brighter section of the terminal. The polished floor gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the artificial brightness felt like a kind of relief. Up ahead, I saw a janitor mopping near the food court, his slow, steady motions oddly comforting. Seeing someone else, anyone, was grounding. Proof that I wasn't entirely alone in this strange hour of the night. I sank into a seat near Gate C-21, pulled out my phone and pretended to scroll. My thumbs moved, but my eyes scanned. I watched. I listened. Every squeak of a shoe, every mechanical hiss from the vents, every flicker of light in the corner of my vision. My pulse thudded in my ears, steady but tense. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it was. It wasn't until the janitor passed me again that I spoke. "Hey, do you work this whole section?" He nodded. "Yeah, all of Concourse C." "Did you see a guy earlier? Black jacket, sitting by C-17. The janitor frowned. "C-17's been dark all night. Haven't seen anyone there." I opened my mouth to push further, but he had already turned and kept walking. I checked the gate again. Empty. At 4:10 a.m., the PA system crackled. "Final boarding call for Flight 837 to Phoenix at Gate C-17. My head snapped up. The screen above the gate was still blank. The gate was closed. No one else reacted. The voice was calm, clear, but something about the tone chilled me, like it wasn't coming from the same system. I walked closer. C-17 was still dark, but the man was back. This time he stood. Same clothes, same stillness, but now his head tracked me as I approached. I stopped 20 feet away. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer, just kept watching. I turned and walked away, but I could feel his eyes on my back the entire way. At 6:05 a.m., my gate opened. Flight 224 to San Diego. I boarded, found my seat, buckled in. I stared out the window, half expecting to see him on the tarmac. But there was nothing. As we taxied to the runway, the plane passed Gate C-17. It was still dark, but now a single figure stood by the windows, watching the plane leave. I've flown dozens of times since that night. Different cities, different terminals, but sometimes at certain hours when the lights dim and the gates are quiet, I still see him, never moving, never speaking, just watching. And I never fly through Denver after midnight anymore. I found my dad's old camera while cleaning out the attic on a rainy Saturday afternoon. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of cedar and forgotten boxes. I was halfway through a stack of brittle yearbooks and tangled holiday lights when I opened a box labeled college stuff in faded Sharpie. There it was, a dusty Canon AE-1, resting atop a bundle of black and white prints and a cracked baseball glove. Its leather casing was worn thin at the corners. The strap frayed, and it smelled faintly of mildew and something deeper, like old paper and time itself. The lens cap was missing. The glass had a faint smudge across it, like it had been hastily wiped before being packed away. I lifted it carefully, as if disturbing it might stir something sacred. The weight of it in my hands was heavier than I remembered, dense, solid, like an artifact rather than a tool. The shutter button was stuck. The film door wouldn't budge, but just holding it brought back a flood of memories. Standing in the backyard while Dad showed me how to meter light, how to frame a subject, how to wait for the moment. I hadn't touched a camera since the funeral. After he died, photography felt like a language I no longer had the right to speak. And yet, something about this camera pulled at me. Not just nostalgia, but a pull in the chest, soft, insistent. So I decided to get it fixed. There weren't many places left that worked on film cameras. I found one downtown, tucked between a boarded-up bookstore and an abandoned dry cleaner. The sign read, "Carl's Camera Repair," the letters faded and curling. Inside, the air smelled of old film and solder. Shelves overflowed with dusty parts, vintage cameras, and unopened rolls of expired Kodak. The place looked frozen in time. Carl himself was older than I expected. White beard, glasses so thick they distorted his eyes. He took the camera gently, like it was something sacred. "Haven't seen one of these in a while," he murmured. "Leave it with me. Might take a few days." I gave him my number. He never asked for a name. 4 days later, Carl called. "It's ready," he said, "but there's something you should see." When I arrived, he didn't bring the camera out right away. He motioned me to the back, into a cluttered workroom where old negatives hung from a string like laundry. It had a roll in it, he said, unprocessed. He handed me a contact sheet, 12 frames. My dad's handwriting marked the corner, 1998. The first few photos were ordinary. Sunsets, a park, our old house. Then came the last two. One showed a man standing in our backyard at night, distant, blurred, unfamiliar. The final frame was of me, asleep in my childhood bed. I left the shop shaken. I didn't remember those photos, didn't remember anyone ever taking them, and I certainly didn't remember a stranger in our backyard. I called my mom, asked her about the camera, about 1998. She went quiet. "You were sleepwalking a lot that year," she said finally. "And there was a break-in. Nothing was taken, but it rattled your father. He stopped using that camera not long after." I asked who the man was. She said, "Your dad never figured that out." The next day, I picked up fresh film and loaded the camera. I started taking photos. Quiet streets, familiar landmarks, my apartment window at night. There was something comforting about it, until I began noticing the patterns. In frame after frame, there was always a figure, sometimes far in the distance, other times barely visible. Always watching. I checked the viewfinder obsessively before shooting. Nothing, but he appeared in the developed images. Always the same man. Chapter 6: The Archive. I went back to Carl's shop. He let me dig through his archives, boxes of old prints and rolls customers had never picked up. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A photo from 1985. Different family, different house, same man. In the background, just standing there. Carl looked over my shoulder. "I've seen him before," he said softly. "Over the years, he shows up sometimes. Always in photos, never in person." That night, I took the camera and waited. I set it on a tripod, aimed it at my apartment door, and clicked the shutter every 5 minutes. At 3:12 a.m., I developed the roll in my makeshift darkroom. In the last frame, the man was inside the apartment, standing just behind me. I called the police. They searched, found no signs of entry, no prints, no figure on the security camera in the hallway. I sent the negatives to a lab for analysis. They said there were no signs of tampering. It was impossible, they said. But I knew what I saw. A week later, I got a package. No return address. Inside, another roll of film. Taped to it was a note, written in a shaky, familiar script. He followed me too. I couldn't stop him. But maybe you can. It was signed with my father's initials. I still have the camera. I don't take photos anymore. But sometimes late at night, I look through the viewfinder, just to check. And once in a while, when the air feels too still, I press the shutter and wait to see who shows up. It was almost 1 a.m. when I found myself alone on the platform of the 12th Street subway station. I had missed my connection by less than a minute. Doors shut in my face, train pulling away, taillights vanishing into the tunnel. The schedule said the next train wouldn't arrive for another 40 minutes. It was late, and the city above had already gone to sleep. The platform was quiet. Too quiet. A lone vending machine buzzed faintly, and the fluorescent lights flickered every few seconds, casting thin shadows that danced with each pulse. I was the only one there. Or so I thought. The 12th Street station wasn't one of the nicer stops. In fact, it was one of the oldest in the city. Its age showed in every corner. The tiles were cracked and stained, some missing entirely, revealing the rough cement beneath. Paint peeled from the iron pillars in long, curling strips, and the overhead lights hummed with an uneven flicker, casting a sickly green hue across the empty platform. The air was thick with the sharp tang of mildew, old grease, and something metallic, like rust or blood. The benches were bolted down, but one was missing a slat, and another had a crude message scratched deep into the wood. There were no attendants at this hour, no maintenance staff, no security patrols. Just the faint buzz of a vending machine down the corridor and the persistent echo of dripping water somewhere deep in the tunnel. It felt like a place the city had forgotten, like something had been left behind here. I sat down on the far end of the bench, jacket pulled tightly around me to ward off the cold air seeping from the tunnel. I pulled out my phone to distract myself, but the signal was barely alive. Pages wouldn't load. Messages wouldn't send. After a few futile minutes, I locked the screen and stared at my reflection in the dark glass across the tracks. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, steady, coming from behind me where the stairwell disappeared into shadow. They echoed from the stairwell, slow, deliberate, one step at a time. My eyes flicked toward the stairs, expecting to see someone rushing down to catch the train like I had earlier. But the steps didn't match the urgency of someone running late. They were too measured, too calm. A man appeared at the top of the platform steps, tall, wiry, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. He didn't carry anything, no bag, no phone. He just stood there for a moment, looking down the platform. Then he started walking toward me. He didn't sit, didn't say anything. He just stood about 15 feet away, staring across the tracks like he was waiting. I tried not to stare, but every few seconds I glanced up. He hadn't moved. His face was hard to see beneath the shadow of his hood, but I could feel his eyes, watching. After a while, I cleared my throat. "You waiting for the downtown line?" He didn't respond, didn't even turn. I shifted on the bench, uneasy. Something about him set me on edge. Maybe it was the silence, or how he hadn't looked at his phone once. I stood up slowly and moved farther down the platform. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the tunnel, wishing for the rumble of a train. But the silence stretched, and then I heard footsteps again. Closer. I turned. He was walking toward me, slow, unblinking, his eyes fixed on me now. No pretense of subtlety. I backed away. "Hey man, what do you want?" He didn't answer, just kept coming. I turned and started walking briskly down the platform toward the exit. His footsteps quickened. I broke into a run. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath coming hard and fast. My mind was in survival mode. Just get to the exit, get out. But when I reached the top, I stopped cold. The turnstiles were locked. Gates chained shut with thick, rusted links. The station booth was dark, unoccupied, and the emergency intercom was shattered, wires hanging like entrails. Panic rose in my throat. I spun around instinctively. He wasn't on the platform anymore. He was halfway up the stairs, his hands relaxed at his sides, his movements unhurried. His face was still obscured beneath the hood, but I could feel the weight of his stare pinning me in place. I didn't wait. I bolted down a side corridor to my right, a narrow, low-ceilinged passage that barely felt like part of the public station. My boots echoed sharply off the grimy tile as I ran. The lights flickered more violently down here, some blinking in and out like they were dying. Dust coated the floor in thick patches, undisturbed for years. This wasn't a hallway meant for passengers. It felt like forgotten infrastructure. Maintenance access? Emergency exit? Maybe. I didn't care. I just needed to be somewhere, anywhere. He wasn't. The hallway ended in a metal door. I tried it. Locked. I turned back. Nothing. No sound. I crept back down the hallway, every nerve on fire. When I reached the main corridor, the man was gone. I hurried back to the platform, breath shaky, heart pounding. Still alone, still no train. I stayed standing, back to the wall, eyes scanning every shadow. When the train finally arrived, it was nearly empty. I stepped on without looking back, chose a seat near the door. As we pulled away, I looked out the window. He was standing at the far end of the platform, watching. I reported it the next morning. The station agent nodded slowly. "You were the 3rd one this month," she said. "Always around the same time. Same station." She didn't seem surprised. "There's no cameras on that platform," she added. "Not working anyway." I left feeling more unsettled than reassured. Now, I avoid late trains whenever I can, especially alone, especially at that station. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I know he wasn't just waiting for the train. And if I'd stayed on that bench, I don't think I'd be here to write this. I've worked the night shift at Henderson's Cleaners for almost 2 years. It's a small family-run dry cleaning shop tucked between a pet supply store and a nail salon in a quiet corner of suburban Pennsylvania. We close at 8, but I usually stay an hour or two later, processing drop-offs for next-day service, tidying up, running the machines. The quiet suited me. The job was simple. People drop off clothes, we tag them, clean them, bag them, and hang them up. Most customers are polite, some are forgetful, and a few try to haggle, but nothing ever really felt off. Until last Thursday night. It was close to closing when a man came in. He looked to be in his mid-30s, tall and wiry, with a kind of nervous energy that didn't match the slow, quiet hour. He wore a black hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low, casting a shadow over his face. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets. When he spoke, his voice was low, clipped. "Can you have this ready by Saturday?" He slid a long black garment bag across the counter, then quickly turned and walked out without waiting for a receipt. No small talk, no pleasantries. I watched him go, a little unsettled, then turned my attention to the bag. As usual, I unzipped it to check the contents and logged the item into our system. Inside was a single piece, a men's gray overcoat. High-end material, heavy wool. Nothing unusual at first glance, until I lifted it from the bag and felt the weight shift unevenly. When I opened it fully and looked at the inside lining, my stomach tightened. There were stains, dark, brownish red, spattered across the lower hem and inner sleeves. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to make me pause. Enough to make me ask, what the hell happened in this coat? Under the fluorescent lights of the prep table, the stain told a different story. Spattered, not smeared. Concentrated near the bottom hem and the inside cuffs. Like someone had tried to wipe their hands clean. It smelled faintly metallic. I've seen a lot come through this shop. Wine, ink, grease. But this didn't look like any of those. I bagged the coat and put it aside. Something about it didn't sit right. I checked the customer slip. He hadn't left a name, just cash payment and the last 4 digits of a phone number. But the coat's inner label told me more. Monogrammed initials, CDH. That night I Googled every missing person in the county with those initials, and I found someone. Christopher D. Holloway. Reported missing 2 days ago. Last seen leaving work downtown, still no leads. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stains. I imagined scenarios, all of them bad. An accident, a fight, something worse. The stillness of the coat haunted me more than any horror movie ever had. It wasn't just fabric and thread anymore. It was a question I couldn't stop asking. What if it was blood? What if someone was missing? What if that someone had a family waiting at home? I didn't want to get involved. I'm not a cop. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this coat wasn't just dirty. It was trying to tell me something. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I drove to the police station, the coat folded neatly in a sealed plastic garment bag. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. When I walked in and told the officer at the front desk what I had, she didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss me. She called someone from investigations. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small interview room. They took it seriously. Detectives came to the shop later that day. They asked questions, reviewed security footage. Luckily, we had a camera above the register. The man had kept his face down, but the timestamp matched the missing person's timeline. The coat? Forensics confirmed it was blood. Human. A match for Holloway. They tracked the last 4 digits of the number on the slip. It was a burner phone. But now they had something to go on. Over the next week, I got updates. They found the man, arrested him trying to cross state lines. His real name was Marcus Bell. No priors, no known connection to Holloway. But the story came out during interrogation. Road rage incident gone too far. He panicked. Drove hours before dumping the body. The coat was all he kept. Some twisted sense of control, maybe. and he made a mistake bringing it to my shop. The news picked it up. They called me a hero in some headlines, said I helped crack the case. But that's not how I see it. I wasn't brave. I was just curious, suspicious, and maybe lucky. But I also can't look at coats the same way now. Every stain makes me pause. Every quiet customer gets a second glance. A few days later, Holloway's sister came in. She wanted to thank me, brought homemade cookies. She cried. I didn't know what to say. That made it real. He wasn't just a headline. He was someone's brother. Someone who never made it home. I still work the night shift, still tag garments, clean shirts, remove spots. But every now and then I look at the door and I wonder, what if I hadn't opened that bag? What if I hadn't said anything? Some stains don't come out, and some things, once you see them, never leave you. It started like most spontaneous weekend plans, half serious at first, then somehow real. Ben and I had been best friends since high school, and we were long overdue for a break from our routines. So when he suggested a quick camping trip up in the Allegheny Mountains, I said yes before thinking twice. We packed light, tent, food, maps, my old Nikon, and the usual gear. The idea was to unplug. Just 2 days in the forest. No signal, no email, no noise. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun was dipping behind the hills, casting long shadows across the dirt road. We hiked 2 miles in and found a small, flat clearing near a stream. Perfect. We set up camp, built a fire, and let the silence stretch. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you're surrounded by nothing but trees. The next morning, we went exploring. No trail markers, no compass, just a sense of curiosity and the freedom that comes with not having a plan. We wandered through thickets of mountain laurel and ducked under pine boughs dripping with dew, the forest damp and rich with the scent of moss and bark. About an hour in, the trees started to space out, and the underbrush thinned until the forest floor looked oddly groomed. That's when we saw it. Steel tracks. Old. Rusted to a deep orange, their edges flaking like old bark. The rails were partially hidden beneath decades of leaf litter, barely visible in some places. Moss crawled up the wooden ties like creeping fingers, and vines snaked over the rails, as if the forest were slowly trying to erase them. They ran in a dead straight line through the woods, vanishing into the dense trees in both directions. No signs, no mile markers, no crossing. Just the tracks, laid down in another century, a ghost limb of something long forgotten. Think it's still active? Ben asked, nudging one rail with his boot. It gave a low groan, shifting slightly in the earth. No way, I said. It's not even connected to anything anymore. Looks like no one's touched it in years. We followed it, for miles. The tracks cut through the forest like a wound that had never healed. We passed a few crumbling telegraph poles, wires hanging like spider webs. At one point, we found a collapsed handcar, metal frame twisted and sunken into the ground, half swallowed by time. Then, just as the sun began to filter harshly through the canopy above, we saw it ahead. A tunnel. Dark. Waiting. It loomed out of the hillside, brick-framed and crumbling. The archway was blackened with time, the date 1902 carved into the keystone. Trees had grown over the top, their roots twisting down like veins. The air grew colder as we approached. The entrance was partially collapsed, but just wide enough to slip through. I shined my flashlight inside. The tunnel was long, much longer than it looked from the outside. "Let's check it out," Ben said. I hesitated. Something about it made my skin prickle. But I followed him in. The temperature dropped fast. The beam from my flashlight cut through thick air, revealing stone walls streaked with water. The rails continued inside, warped and bent with age. We walked for what felt like 10 minutes, but the end never came. The tunnel curved slightly, just enough to keep us from seeing what was ahead. The sound of our footsteps echoed too sharply. It felt like something else was walking just a half step behind. "Let's head back," I said. Ben didn't argue. When we turned around, I realized something strange. We hadn't passed any side tunnels or doors, but a rusted service ladder now stood against the wall. I could have sworn it wasn't there before. We didn't talk much on the way out. Back at camp, I couldn't stop thinking about the tunnel. That ladder. The length of it. Something felt off. Ben seemed distant too. He kept flipping through the photos on his phone, zooming in on the ones from inside. "I swear there was something in the corner of this shot," he said. "But now it's gone." That night he barely slept, kept sitting up, shining his light into the woods. I heard him whispering once, but when I asked, he said it was nothing. The next day, I woke up to find Ben gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his flashlight and pack were missing. I followed his footprints, back toward the tunnel. I yelled for him, but the forest swallowed the sound. At the tunnel entrance, I found his flashlight, still on. Just inside the threshold, the beam pointed into the darkness, but Ben was nowhere. I waited for hours, pacing the tree line, calling Ben's name until my voice cracked and my throat burned. I listened, desperately, for movement, for any sound that wasn't the rustling leaves or the occasional creak of forest branches shifting in the wind. Nothing answered. Eventually, as the light began to die and shadows spilled longer across the forest floor, I knew I couldn't wait anymore. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight with dread, but I stepped into the tunnel. Inside, everything had changed. The air felt heavier, thick and metallic. The cold that hit me was not natural. It was the kind of chill that settled in your bones and made your skin crawl. The tunnel seemed darker too, like it was swallowing my flashlight beam more than before. My steps echoed more sharply now, bouncing around in unnatural rhythms, like I was being followed a beat behind. The tracks no longer looked broken and rusted. They gleamed faintly in the beam of my light, as if freshly polished, as if ready for something to roll down them. The smell hit me harder this time. Not just rust, but something acrid, chemical, like burnt wires, like blood left to dry in heat. I walked deeper, 10 minutes, then 20. My eyes flicked constantly between the beam of my flashlight and the surrounding dark. I called Ben's name again. It didn't echo. It just vanished. When I finally stopped, I realized where I was. The same spot as before, same curve in the tunnel, same worn bricks along the wall, and that ladder, still there, still impossibly rusted, and still leading into a hole in the ceiling that swallowed all light. It hadn't moved, but I had, and I still didn't climb it. I made it back to camp after sunset. Everything looked wrong. Our gear had been moved. My bag was open, my Nikon was gone. But on the ground near the fire pit, someone had placed a photo. It was from my camera, one I hadn't taken. It showed me, asleep in the tent. I reported Ben missing. A full search team came out. Dogs, drones, nothing. No one found the tunnel. I went back with them, swearing it was there. I had GPS coordinates, photos, but when we reached the spot, there was nothing but trees. No tracks, no tunnel, just forest. It's been a year. I moved to a city, changed my number, but sometimes in the middle of the night, I hear it. The faint, distant sound of a train whistle. And once, when I came home from work, there was a photo on my kitchen table. It showed the tunnel entrance, and Ben standing just inside it, looking back. My name is Roy Miller. I'm 61 years old, and I've lived on this land my entire life. It was my father's before it was mine, and his father's before him. 80 acres of flat Kansas earth, passed down through 3 generations of Millers. Just a few miles outside a town nobody puts on postcards. The land is split between corn and soy, dependable crops for a dependable living. There's a red barn my grandfather built with his own hands back in '57, still standing strong, and a long shaded porch where I drink my morning coffee and watch the weather roll in. I took over the farm when Dad passed 15 years ago. I never left, not for college, not for war, not for anything. I figured there was enough to learn right here. Soil, seed, sky. I've kept it going the same way he did. Quiet, simple, reliable. No chemicals, no shortcuts. Just hard work, crop rotation, and paying attention to the land. Out here, you get used to the quiet. No neighbors close enough to bother. No city lights to drown out the stars. No traffic, no sirens, just the chirp of crickets and the wind brushing through stalks. Just you, the crops, and the slow rhythm of seasons that don't care about clocks. I liked it that way. Always have. Never needed much more than the land, a dog at my heels, and a good set of boots. But something changed last summer. It started small. A section of the cornfield, maybe 1/10 of an acre, grew faster than the rest. Taller, darker, greener. The kind of color you don't see in August, not with heat that dry. I thought it was runoff at first, maybe fertilizer pooled there. But the soil tested normal. Then came the birds. They stopped flying over that patch, avoided it like it carried disease. I'd find feathers on the fence posts, scattered like warnings. I told myself it was just coincidence. Late one night, I was out checking the irrigation valves when I heard it. A hum, low and steady, not mechanical, not natural, like a distant engine idling underground. I stood there, flashlight off, listening. The sound was coming from the corn. When I stepped closer, it stopped. A few days later, I noticed a path through the tall corn. Narrow, winding, not like a tractor trail, too tight for machinery. It hadn't been there the day before. I followed it in. 30 steps, maybe 40, before it ended in a small clearing. The corn there was dead, wilted, like it had been burned from the inside out. No scorch marks, no insects, just gray, brittle stalks and dry earth. I went back the next day. The path was gone, like it had never existed. I set up a trail cam, one of those motion-triggered ones hunters use. Pointed it at the patch. Next morning the camera was gone. Not knocked over. Gone. The steel bracket was still bolted to the post, cleanly unscrewed. I bought another, hit it better, chained it down. That one disappeared too. A man showed up a week later, just before sunset. He pulled up in an old Ford pickup, the kind you don't see much anymore unless someone's clinging to it. Tinted windows, dusty plates, no decals. He didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine running, like he was deciding something. When he did step out, I clocked him as mid-50s, maybe older. Heavy boots, dark jeans, and a windbreaker zipped to the collar despite the heat. Said he was with the state agriculture board. I asked for ID. He didn't offer any. Just smiled, thin-lipped. He said he'd heard reports about anomalous crop behavior in the region. Claimed he was doing routine checks. Wanted to take soil samples, said it like he was asking to borrow sugar. I told him to get back in his truck and leave. He didn't argue, just looked past me toward the corn. Stared so long I started to speak again, but he turned and got back in the truck without another word. Dust kicked up behind his tires as he left. The next morning, I found boot prints at the edge of the cornfield, not mine. Too wide, too deep, fresh. I went back to the dead clearing one last time. I brought a shovel. The dirt was looser than I expected, easy to dig. About 3 feet down, I hit something hard. Metal, a flat, rusted plate, maybe 3 feet across. Smooth surface, no markings. I kept digging, couldn't find the edge. The hum started again, louder now. I dropped the shovel and ran. That night, lightning struck out of nowhere. No storm, just one bolt straight into the corn. It burned for hours. When I came out at sunrise, the patch was gone. Black earth. Nothing left but ash and glassy soil. No path, no plate, no hum. They came again, men in unmarked trucks, quiet, efficient, took samples, dug trenches, covered them up, told me nothing, left no contact. But I watched them from the porch. They didn't touch the barn or the well, just that spot. They were afraid of it. The field grew back normal the next season. Birds returned. No more paths. But sometimes when the wind dies and the stars are out, I hear the hum again, soft below the ground, and I wonder what's still buried out there, waiting to grow. I needed a break. Life had been relentless. Long work weeks, barely any sleep, and a creeping anxiety I couldn't shake. So I did what I always did when things got too loud. I packed my rods and tackle box, and I drove north. This time I chose a lake I'd never fished before, Briar Lake. Tucked away in the hills of upstate New York, about a 4-hour drive from where I lived. Remote, quiet, and supposedly full of bass. Just what I needed. I left at 3 a.m. to get there by sunrise. The drive was peaceful. Empty roads, the occasional deer on the shoulder, and the hum of my truck beneath a sky just beginning to pale. I arrived at the lake a little before 7. Mist hovered over the water. Trees loomed tall on all sides. There was only one other vehicle in the gravel lot, a dark blue sedan with tinted windows. That was the first thing that felt off. I parked a few spaces down. No one was in sight. No movement. The car looked like it had been there a while, dewy and streaked with dust. I figured someone was already out on the water. Maybe they'd gone in early. I got out, stretched, and grabbed my gear. The air was crisp, the kind that smells like pine and mud and morning. As I was unloading, I noticed something. The sedan's trunk was slightly ajar. Not popped, not wide open, just not quite closed. I stood there for a second, considering, but I brushed it off. None of my business. Maybe they'd overstuffed it. Maybe the latch was bad. I headed down the short path to the dock. The lake was still as glass, not a ripple. No boats, no voices, just birdsong and the soft lapping of water at the wooden posts. I sat up on the far end of the dock, cast my line, let the silence settle. For a while, everything was perfect. I lost track of time, caught a few smallmouths, ate a sandwich, let the peace wash over me. But I kept glancing back toward the lot. Still no sign of anyone. That blue sedan sat there, unchanged. Around 10, the sun had risen enough to burn off the mist. I packed up, deciding to check out a second fishing spot on the other side of the lake. As I walked back up the path toward my truck, I noticed the trunk of the sedan was now fully open. Something was sticking out. It looked like fabric. I stopped. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I told myself it was probably gear, sleeping bag, tent, whatever. Still, I angled my walk to get a better look without making it obvious. As I passed, my stomach dropped. It was a jacket, a man's jacket, and beneath it, bare skin. I got into my truck and locked the doors. My hands were shaking. I didn't turn the key, just sat there thinking. Then I took out my phone and dialed 911. I kept my voice low, told them what I'd seen. The dispatcher asked if I felt safe. I said yes, but I wasn't sure. They told me to stay put. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then the sedan's passenger door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, lean, wore jeans and a flannel shirt, dark hair. He didn't look at me, just walked around to the back of the car. I ducked low in my seat. He lifted the jacket, looked inside the trunk. Then, calmly, he closed it, walked around to the driver's side, and waited. I thought about starting the truck, driving away. But I didn't. I was frozen. The cruiser pulled into the lot 5 minutes later, blue lights flashing. The man didn't run. He just stood there as the officers got out, hand on their holsters. I got out and waved them down. They went straight to the sedan. I didn't hear much, but I saw the man get cuffed, and I saw the look on the younger officer's face when he opened the trunk. Later, they told me the man was wanted in another state for questioning in an ongoing investigation, a missing persons case that had just started gaining media attention. The body in the trunk belonged to a man named David Klein, reported missing 2 days prior by his wife. A father of 2, last seen leaving work late in the evening, never making it home. The suspect had driven for hours, passing through 3 counties before ending up at Briar Lake. According to the officers, he'd been parked there since well before dawn. No fishing gear, no cooler, nothing that suggested he came for the water. What they found in the car made everything worse. Plastic sheeting folded neatly under the spare tire, heavy-duty gloves, a shovel in the back seat, and a burner phone tucked beneath the passenger seat. There was no doubt he had been planning something. If you hadn't made that call, one of the detectives told me, we think he would have dumped the body in the lake, maybe even deeper into the woods. They said I'd probably stop something worse from happening. I didn't feel heroic, just lucky. Lucky I trusted my gut. Lucky I made the call before curiosity got the better of me. Lucky I didn't get closer to that car. I kept thinking about what could have happened. What if I'd gotten there earlier? What if he'd seen me first? What if I'd checked the trunk myself? That morning plays over in my head a lot more than I'd like. I still fish alone, but I don't go to new lakes without checking the place first. And I always pay attention to the cars in the lot. Still water runs deep, and sometimes what's under the surface is darker than you think. About 6 months ago, Mia and I booked a cabin through Airbnb, a last-minute getaway to a remote corner of upstate New York. After months of city noise and screen time, we needed space to breathe. The listing looked perfect. Wood-paneled interior, fireplace, big windows that looked out into the woods. The kind of place you picture when someone says, cabin. No neighbors in sight. At least, that's what we thought. We arrived Friday afternoon. Mia unpacked while I started the fire. We cooked pasta, played cards, drank cheap wine until the stars came out. For a while, everything was exactly what we needed. Saturday morning, I stepped out onto the deck, coffee in hand, letting the crisp mountain air fill my lungs. A thin mist still clung to the grass, and the only sounds were the wind through the trees and the distant crackle of the wood stove inside. That's when I saw him. A man, standing at the edge of the property, maybe 50 feet away, just beyond the wooden fence that marked the boundary where the maintained yard gave way to thick woods. He wasn't moving, just standing there, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. He wasn't dressed for a hike. Heavy boots, dark jacket, worn jeans. He looked too still, not curious, not cautious, just fixed. I raised my hand in a half-wave, the kind you give strangers in rural places when you want to seem polite but distant. He didn't wave back, didn't nod. He turned slowly and walked back into the woods without a sound. I went inside and told Mia. She looked up from her book and shrugged. Maybe he's a neighbor. Could have been checking the fence line or something. It's rural, she added when she saw my expression. People live differently out here. Maybe, but something about the way he stood there unnerved me. Still, motionless, like he was waiting for something. That night, we were halfway through a movie when there was a knock at the door. Not loud, just 3 soft raps. I opened it. No one was there. The porch was empty. The trees were still. I stepped out, scanned the woods with my flashlight. Nothing. Mia asked if maybe it was wind or an animal, but animals don't knock. Sunday afternoon, we took a walk down the dirt road that led from the cabin, just stretching our legs before the drive home. That's when we saw the mailbox. It was a few hundred feet from ours. Rusted, bent. The house it belonged to was barely visible through the trees. Old, with boarded windows and a collapsed porch. Someone lived there. There were boot prints in the dirt, cigarette butts in a tin can nailed to the porch post. Someone lived there recently. We returned to the cabin to find something tucked under the front doormat. A note. Folded. No envelope. Inside in shaky handwriting, stay inside after dark. No name, no explanation. Mia wanted to leave right then. I agreed. But when I went to start the car, the battery was dead. We locked the doors and stayed close that night. No TV, just the sound of the woods pressing in. I peeked through the blinds around 10 p.m. He was there, standing at the tree line again, closer this time. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. At 2:13 a.m., the motion light behind the cabin flicked on with a sharp hum, casting harsh shadows against the back wall. We froze. The cabin was so quiet we could hear the faint creak of the porch boards under pressure. Someone was out there. Then the back doorknob jiggled. Once, then again. Harder this time. Then faster, rhythmically, like someone trying different levels of force testing. Not desperate, methodical. I reached for the fire poker leaning by the hearth, my knuckles white around the handle. Mia clutched her phone, screen glowing, though we both knew we had no service. Her breath came in short, quiet bursts. The jiggling stopped. A long pause. Then, nothing. Silence so complete it made my ears ring. At dawn, I popped the hood and managed to jump the car with an old battery pack from the emergency kit. We didn't pack. Didn't clean up. We just drove. No one followed. No cars behind us. Just trees fading in the rear view. Back in the city, I left a message for the Airbnb host. He replied 3 days later, "I'm sorry. That property hasn't been active in over a year. You must have booked a mirrored listing. We took it down after an incident with a neighbor. Law enforcement was involved. I thought it was handled. We never went back. But sometimes when I walk past fenced yards in the city, I check the shadows. And once, just once, I saw him again. Standing in someone else's yard. Still watching." Saturday was supposed to be our day. Just me and Lily. My husband had picked up an extra shift, and I saw it as a chance for some much-needed one-on-one time with our daughter. Lily had been asking all week about going to the mall. The one with the big indoor carousel and the coin-operated puppies she loved. It had become a little ritual of ours. She'd ride the carousel at least twice. We'd split a cinnamon pretzel. And if she was patient while I browsed shoes, she'd get to pick a toy from the dollar bin. We left home around 10. The sky was a perfect blue, and the breeze was warm for late March, almost like a tease of summer. I remember helping Lily zip up her favorite pink hoodie, the one with the ears on the hood, and sliding her tiny arms into her light jeans. She insisted on wearing her sparkly sneakers, the ones that lit up with every step. "So everyone can see me sparkle, Mommy," she said, beaming. We sang along to her favorite songs in the car on the way there, and she asked if the carousel horses would remember her from last time. I smiled and said, "Of course they will." When we arrived, I parked in the underground lot, 2 levels down, close to the elevator. I double-checked that my purse was zipped and slung across my chest. Then I took Lily's hand. She swung her arm back and forth in rhythm as we walked, her sneakers blinking pink and purple with each hop. The concrete walls echoed her little voice as she sang softly, making up silly lyrics to a song she half remembered. The mall was already buzzing when we got in. Families, teenagers, elderly couples, typical Saturday crowd. I let Lily pick our path, which of course meant beelining to the carousel. As I waited near the railing, watching her go round and round, I noticed a man standing nearby. Late 30s, plain clothes, baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't watching the ride. He was watching the kids. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just a dad. Maybe his kid was on the other side of the carousel. But he didn't have that anxious parent energy. No smile, no wave, just staring. I watched him more closely. When the ride ended and Lily ran back to me, I took her hand and guided her toward the food court. I glanced over my shoulder. The man was gone. Lily wanted a cinnamon pretzel. I stood in line, holding her tiny hand as she hummed beside me. My eyes scanned the crowd. I couldn't help it. That man had set something off in me. Then I saw him again, far across the food court, pretending to browse the smoothie stand. He wasn't ordering, just standing there, watching. I tightened my grip on Lily. My throat was dry, but I tried to act normal. Ordered the pretzel, took our tray, and picked a table near a group of other moms. Safety in numbers. I sat Lily facing me so I could keep an eye on everything behind her. The man disappeared again. We headed into the department store after lunch. I wanted to look at spring jackets, and Lily was starting to get restless. She danced ahead of me, skipping down the wide aisles, still within reach. In the children's section, I let go of her hand for just a moment to check a price tag. That's all it took. When I looked back up, she was gone. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest. I called her name. Once, twice. My voice sounded strange, sharp. Then I heard it, her giggle. A few rows down. I turned the corner and found her standing next to a display, grinning. And behind her, partially turned away, was the man. He looked up, saw me, and walked away. I scooped Lily into my arms and followed him, heart pounding so loud it muffled everything else. My arms trembled, but I held her tight, as if letting go for even a second might mean losing her. He didn't run. He just walked, quickly, deliberately, slipping between racks of clothing with the ease of someone who'd done it before. His posture was too relaxed, too rehearsed. Not someone fleeing in panic, someone with a plan. I kept my eyes locked on the back of his hoodie, weaving through the displays, narrowly avoiding mannequins and startled shoppers. Lily was silent now, her head buried against my shoulder, sensing that this wasn't part of the game. He exited into the main concourse without looking back. I was a few steps behind, adrenaline burning in my chest, trying to match his pace without losing him. The crowd thinned near the edge of the mall, where the overhead lights were dimmer and fewer stores were open. He moved through the corridor toward the parking garage entrance, his strides longer now, more urgent. And that's when I stopped thinking. My voice cracked out before I even realized what I was doing. Security, somebody stop him. A guard near the entrance turned. I pointed. That man, follow him. The guard hesitated for a split second, then moved. The man broke into a jog. Another guard appeared near the exit. Together they cornered him near the stairwell. I stood frozen, clutching Lily, watching them talk to him. He gestured, shrugged, acted confused, like I was crazy. They asked me to wait with Lily in the security office. They pulled the camera footage. He had followed us, from the carousel to the food court, into the department store. In aisle 9, he had stood just inches from Lily, one hand reaching into his coat pocket. That was enough. The police were called. Turns out he had a record. Prior incidents involving minors. Nothing that had stuck. Loopholes, technicalities, nothing that had kept him off the streets. He wasn't carrying a weapon. But in his coat pocket, they found zip ties. I still think about it. What if I hadn't turned around in time? What if I'd looked at one more price tag? What if I hadn't seen him earlier and been on alert? I try not to spiral, but it happens a lot. Now, I hold Lily's hand like it's the last thing anchoring me to earth. We don't do Saturday mall trips anymore. And when we go out, now whenever we step outside, I double-check the locks, the straps, the route. I count the seconds she's out of my sight, even in safe places. We don't go to crowded malls anymore. Lily doesn't even ask. Instead, we bake cookies, visit the quiet park, or read her carousel books at home. And when we do go out, I study faces. The way someone lingers too long, or how they glance at her when they think I'm not looking. I notice it all now. Not because I want to, because I have to. That day changed me, not just how I parent, how I live. Because danger doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits patiently, calmly, casually, just close enough to reach. It was supposed to be a short getaway. Just 3 of us, me, Tyler, and Jen. We'd been talking about it for months in our group chat, trading memes and half-serious links to hiking trails like we were going to actually go. But then one Friday, we just picked a date. We all needed the break, from work stress, city crowds, digital noise. Something quiet, something real. Something that felt far away from everything else. Tyler found the spot, the Ouachita Mountains in Arkansas. Remote, rugged, and overlooked compared to other hiking destinations. That's what sold us. We didn't want crowds or marked paths. We wanted space. We packed light, 3 backpacks, 2 tents, freeze-dried food, a reliable map, a GPS unit, an emergency radio, and enough water purification tablets to last us. Tyler had done trips like this before. He was the planner, the one with the topo maps and gear recommendations. Jen brought her camera and a journal. I brought a second pair of socks and told them that was good enough. The first day was everything we wanted it to be. The trail started wide and well-marked, winding under towering pines. The air was cool, dry, and clean. Bird song filled the spaces between our conversations. The forest felt alive, but not threatening, like it was letting us in. We hiked 12 miles before setting up camp near a shallow creek that ran over smooth stone. Tyler made dinner on the camp stove while Jen sketched the tree line. I lay on my back and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. It was the kind of stillness you forget exists until you're in it. And once it finds you, you don't want to let it go. The next morning, Tyler found what he called a cut-through. Not on the map. A narrow game trail that veered off the main path and dipped deeper into the forest. "It'll reconnect," he said. Faster, more scenic. It was narrower, darker. We had to duck under branches, push through brush. No blazes, no signage, but we trusted him. After an hour, the forest changed, denser, quieter. The sunlight barely touched the ground. We lost the trail. We weren't worried at first. Tyler had the map. I had GPS, but then we realized none of our phones had signal. Even the GPS wouldn't lock, just spinning. We tried backtracking, but the forest was disorienting. No landmarks. Trees looked the same in every direction. Tyler frowned more with each step. Then Jen pointed something out, a footprint, but not ours. Too large, toes long, almost clawed, spaced strangely far apart. We laughed nervously. "Maybe a bear," I said, but I'd never seen a bear print like that. By late afternoon, we were still wandering, hungry, irritated. Tyler didn't want to admit we were lost, but we were. Then Jen saw something else, markings on a tree. 3 slashes, vertical, deep. Then another set, 20 feet away. Then another. We followed them. It felt like a trail, not natural, too precise. Then we saw it, a pile of stone stacked neatly, with a twig cross stuck into the top. None of us spoke. We made camp in silence, no fire, just cold food and tense quiet. Jen kept glancing over her shoulder. Tyler stayed close to his knife. In the middle of the night, I heard something. Not footsteps. Not animals. Breathing. Just outside my tent. Low, slow. Then it stopped. At dawn, Tyler was gone. His tent was still zipped. His boots were gone. But no sign of struggle. No note. No trail. Jen panicked. I tried to stay calm. We searched in every direction, yelling his name. No echo. No response. We came back to camp to find something placed between our tents. A twig, bent in the shape of a circle. The forest got quieter. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of our steps and our breathing. We tried following the markings again. They curved now, doubled back, then stopped. That night, Jen cried. I kept watch. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke to find Jen gone. Her pack was there, her flashlight, but not her. Another circle was left behind. I didn't shout, didn't look. I just started walking. I followed the sun, heading west. No more trails, no more markers. Once I thought I saw someone through the trees. Too tall, too still. I didn't stop. I didn't run either. Just kept moving. On the third day, I stumbled onto a road. Gravel, then pavement. A ranger found me 2 hours later, dehydrated and shaking. I told them everything. Search teams were sent. They found our campsite, but nothing else. No gear, no prints, no Tyler, no Jen. It's been 6 months. Therapy hasn't helped much. I wake up some nights convinced I'm still in that forest. My apartment walls feel too thin. I keep the lights on. I stopped hiking. I deleted every photo from that trip. I haven't spoken to either of their families. I wouldn't know what to say. But last week, I took a new route home from work. Side street, unfamiliar neighborhood. And there it was, carved into the bark of a tree next to the sidewalk. 3 deep, vertical slashes. Below it, in the gutter, a small circle of twigs. Someone left it for me. It started as a solo weekend getaway in the early spring of 2023. Just me, a cooler of sandwiches, my camera, and the long stretch of coast I'd found on a forgotten blog post. The location was remote, a deserted beach somewhere along the Oregon coastline. No cell service, no nearby towns. That was the appeal. I was burned out. Too many deadlines, too much noise. I needed quiet. I needed space. And for the first day, that's exactly what I got. The beach was a dream. Fine, powdery sand stretched for miles in both directions, broken only by jagged cliffs that rose like ancient sentinels from the edge of the sea. The ocean shimmered under the afternoon sun, deep blue and endless. A light breeze rustled the dune grass as I set up camp just beyond the ridge, pitching my small tent on a flat patch sheltered from the wind. I spent the afternoon wandering the shoreline barefoot, my camera slung over one shoulder. I knelt by tide pools, capturing the delicate symmetry of starfish, the scuttling of tiny crabs, and the slow sway of anemones beneath the surface. Gulls cried overhead, swooping low and then circling high again, their shadows sliding over the sand. There wasn't another soul in sight. No voices, no traffic, no buzz of technology, just the wind threading through the dunes, the distant crash of waves, and the quiet rhythm of my own breathing. I felt untethered, like I'd stepped out of time. As dusk crept in, I lit a small fire with driftwood and twigs I'd gathered earlier. I roasted marshmallows slowly, letting them catch fire and burn to black before peeling away the crisp shell. The stars emerged one by one, and I lay back against my rolled-up jacket, watching the night unfold above me. When I finally crawled into the tent, the surf was steady, hypnotic. I drifted off quickly, with the smell of salt air in my nose and the warmth of the fire still on my skin. It felt like freedom, pure, undisturbed freedom. On the second morning, I woke early to catch the sunrise. The sky was a pale canvas streaked with orange and violet, and that's when I saw him. A man, far down the beach, walking slowly along the shoreline. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was another camper, maybe a hiker who'd wandered down from the cliffs, but he didn't have a pack, no shoes, just jeans and a long-sleeve shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He didn't look toward me. He just kept walking. He disappeared around a bend in the coast. I went about my morning, coffee, granola bar, checking the photos on my camera, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. A few hours later, I walked down the beach in the direction he'd gone. I saw his footprints in the sand, clear and deep, but they stopped suddenly about a mile out. No trail inland, no sign he'd turned around. Just gone. That night, the wind howled harder. The fire sputtered, and for the first time, the sound of the waves didn't comfort me. The next morning, I found something odd. Footprints. Fresh ones, near my camp, circling, but not mine. I hadn't heard anything. Nothing had been taken, but someone had been close watching. I packed a day bag and climbed one of the smaller cliffs for a better view. Nothing but endless forest behind the beach. No houses, no campsites, no other people. And yet, the feeling wouldn't go away. That evening, I built a bigger fire, larger than I needed, feeding it driftwood until the flames licked high and cast long shadows across the sand. I didn't plan to sleep. Every rustle of grass or gust of wind set my nerves on edge. I sat just outside my tent, staring into the fire, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. Around midnight, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the rhythmic crash of waves or the occasional whistle of wind through the dunes. This was softer, intentional, movement, footsteps. I froze, holding my breath, then slowly reached for my flashlight, clicking it on with trembling fingers. I stepped away from the fire, scanning past the edge of my camp. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on a shape just beyond the dune. A face, pale, gaunt, unmoving, eyes locked on mine. I opened my mouth to yell, but he ducked out of sight, vanishing behind the dune before I could make a sound. I stood there for a long time, flashlight shaking in my grip, waiting for him to reappear. But he didn't. I didn't sleep at all, not even for a minute. At dawn, I packed everything. Fast. I started hiking back toward where I'd parked 2 days ago, about a 3-mile walk through loose sand and brush. My heart was racing the entire way. Halfway there, I looked back. He was following, keeping his distance, but definitely there. I broke into a run. I reached my truck, breathless, legs shaking. The parking area was still empty, just my vehicle and the whisper of the wind through the pines. I fumbled with the keys, dropped them, cursed out loud. When I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, I looked up. He was standing at the edge of the trees, watching. He didn't move. I started the engine and drove. I went straight to the nearest ranger station, nearly an hour away. They took the report, said they'd send someone out to check, but they didn't sound surprised. That stretch of beach? We get a few calls like this every season, one ranger said. Never find anyone. I showed them the photos, the footprints. They nodded, and that was it. That was 3 months ago. I haven't been back. But sometimes when I'm alone, when the world gets quiet, I remember the look in his eyes. Not anger, not madness, just patience. Like he had all the time in the world to wait for me to come back. My name is Jake Ellis. I'm a freelance photographer, mostly landscapes and rural Americana, which means I'm always on the road. One night in mid-October 2023, I was driving back from a job in northern Utah, heading toward my home in Colorado. I'd underestimated how long the shoot would take, and by the time I was back on the highway, it was already close to midnight. I decided to take the scenic route, State Route 319, long, winding, and absolutely deserted at that hour. It cut through farmland, forest, and hills, but it shaved off a good 30 minutes. At least that was the idea. The road was narrow, worn smooth from time and weather, and completely unlit. My headlights carved tunnels of light through the dark, revealing nothing but more blacktop and the occasional twisted tree limb overhanging the road. No traffic, no houses, just the low hum of my tires on the asphalt and the whisper of wind through partially rolled down windows. When I opened them wider, the air rushed in, sharp, earthy, and tinged with pine and dry soil. It was peaceful in the way that makes your skin prickle. Too still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you second guess whether you passed a turn or missed a landmark. Even the insects seemed to chirp more distantly here, like the land itself was holding its breath. I passed a small metal sign for a county road I didn't recognize. The letters were worn to the point of being unreadable, the post slightly bent. After that, nothing. Just unbroken darkness and trees leaning in from both sides of the road like silent witnesses. I sat forward in my seat, instinctively slowing down, and that's when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, just barely illuminated by my high beams. Long coat, backpack slung over one shoulder, thumb outstretched. I slowed down instinctively. She looked mid-20s, maybe younger. Pale face, tired eyes. She didn't wave or smile, just stared at me like she'd been waiting. I rolled to a stop a few yards ahead. My hand hovered over the door handle. Something didn't feel right. I sat there, engine idling, watching her in the rearview mirror. She hadn't moved. Not a step. My gut twisted. I'm not the kind of guy who leaves someone stranded, but every hair on my neck was standing up. I put the truck in park and got out slowly. "Need a ride?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. Then finally a small nod. I opened the passenger door. She climbed in without a word. I got back in, shut my door, and we pulled away. That's when the real unease began. She didn't speak, not even when I asked where she was headed, just stared out the window. I tried again, light tone, friendly. "You okay?" "What happened?" Still nothing. I glanced over. Her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Something was very wrong. About 15 minutes in, she finally spoke. "Turn left here." It wasn't a marked road, just a gravel path into the woods. No lights out here, I said, trying to keep things casual. Just turn, she replied. Her voice was low, flat. Against my better judgment, I did. The path narrowed, gravel crunching beneath the tires as thick rows of trees pressed in from either side. Their branches arched overhead like the ribs of some ancient creature, blocking out even the faintest sliver of moonlight. My headlights flickered with every dip in the uneven road, barely illuminating more than a few feet ahead. Then she said it, sudden and calm. Stop here. Her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. I eased the brake, tires sliding slightly in loose gravel. The engine idled in the silence that followed. Without another word, she opened the door and stepped out, the dome light catching her face for just a second, expression unreadable. She turned back to me slowly. Don't get out, she said, voice firmer now. Just drive. Now. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My breath caught. I didn't move. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate movement in the underbrush to my right. Footsteps. Slow, multiple sets, getting closer. I hit the gas. Gravel flew as I reversed, swerving back onto the main road. My heart pounded like it would rip through my chest. In the rear view, I saw figures emerge from the trees. At least 3, maybe 4. They didn't chase, just watched. I didn't stop driving for over an hour. I reported it the next day. Sheriff's office said they'd look into it, but they didn't ask many questions. Didn't seem surprised. Lot of strange stuff out there, the deputy said. You were smart to keep going. That was it. I don't drive at night anymore. Not alone. And I don't stop for hitchhikers. But sometimes I think about her. The way she looked at me when she got out. Like she was saving me. Like she knew what they would have done. And how close I came to finding out. I've worked at Lunsford Tech for almost 3 years now. I handle software QA. Hours of clicking through interfaces, noting bugs, writing reports in a spreadsheet that no one outside my team ever reads. My workspace is a windowless cubicle tucked between the server closet and a break room with a broken vending machine. Predictable. Repetitive, but it pays the bills and keeps my head down. Every morning, I arrive just after 8 a.m., coffee in hand, and drive down to the bottom of the company parking structure. Level 4. It's the lowest level of the garage, well below ground, buried beneath 3 layers of cement and steel. That's where the overflow parking is. Most employees try to avoid it. It's darker, damper, and the lights flicker like a dying signal. There are fewer cameras down there, fewer cars too. The air always smells faintly of oil and mildew. It echoes when you walk. But it's always near the elevator and always open, so I got used to it. Routine became comfort. Until recently, I never thought twice about it. Now I can't stop thinking about it. It started with something small. One evening after work, I found a sticky note under my wiper blade. No handwriting, just a blank yellow square. Thought it was someone playing a joke. The next night, same thing. Then again. Always the same, no ink, no print, just perfectly centered. I asked security if they'd seen anything. They shrugged, said maybe it was wind. There's no wind on level 4. A week later, I stayed late to finish a release cycle. Left the office around 11 p.m. The garage was empty except for my car and one old gray sedan a few rows down. As I approached my car, I felt it, someone watching. I looked around. Nothing, but then I saw a shadow move behind the concrete pillar near the sedan. Quick, like someone ducking out of view. I backed away, heart hammering, called out. No answer. When I left, I didn't look back. The next day I bought a dash cam, set it to motion record. I wanted proof. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then on the 3rd day, I reviewed the footage. At 2:47 a.m., someone walked past my car, slowly, no face visible. Just a hooded figure, moving from one end of the garage to the other. They stopped at my car, leaned down. The video glitched. When it resumed, the figure was gone. Friday evening I stayed a bit late. Nothing unusual, just wrapping up test cases for a patch deployment. When I stepped into the garage, the air was even heavier than usual. Damp. Still. My footsteps echoed as I approached my car, and that's when I saw it. The USB drive. It sat right in the center of my hood, like it had been carefully placed. Matte black, no labels. Clean, except for a small smudge on the edge, like someone had hesitated holding it. I didn't touch it. Not at first. I walked in a slow circle around the car, scanning the shadows between the pillars, behind the trash bins. No movement. No sound. I used a napkin from my glove compartment to pick it up, dropped it into a Ziploc for my lunch kit, and locked it in my glove box. Even as I drove home, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Back in my apartment, I dug out an old laptop I hadn't used in years, one I never connected to Wi-Fi, just in case. Plugged the USB in, one folder, no name. Inside a single file. I opened it. It was security footage, my desk, my cubicle, the same spinning chair, the same monitor with my bug tracker open. The angle was from above, directly above, as if a camera had been mounted in the ceiling. I never noticed one there. I reported everything to HR and security, showed them the dashcam clip and the USB. They said they'd look into it. Asked me not to speak to anyone else while they conducted internal checks. 3 days later, they called me in, said the footage must be altered, that no cameras were pointed at my desk. Then they suggested I take a leave of absence. Against my better judgment, I went back. I parked on level 2. Couldn't help myself. I took the stairs down to Miger 4. The lights buzzed. My footsteps echoed. There was something scratched into the wall near my old spot. "You're not supposed to be here." I left. Fast. I started watching the building. Sitting in my car across the street. Keeping notes. That's when I saw him. The man from the dashcam footage. He exited through the loading dock. No badge, no uniform, but people moved out of his way. He looked up at my car and smiled. When I came back the next day, my badge didn't work. Security said I wasn't on the employee list anymore. My desk, cleaned out. My supervisor, no longer with the company. I checked the website. My name was gone from the directory. It's been 2 months. I've tried to move on, changed my number, deleted all my work contacts, started using cash more than cards. I keep my phone off at night now. But I still think about it. Level 4. That feeling, that silence. The way it seemed to press in on you the deeper you went. Last week I found myself driving past Lunsford without meaning to. Just muscle memory, I guess. It was raining, hard enough to blur the windows. I turned into the ramp. The gate lifted without resistance. The lights were off. As I eased down the slope to level 4, I felt it again. That weight in my chest, like the air knew something I didn't. There, in my old spot, was my car. Clean, like it had never moved, and taped to the driver's side window fluttering in the wind was a sticky note. This one had 3 words. You never left. It happened about 9 months ago. I was working late at our small marketing agency in downtown Portland. Most nights the office was empty by 6, but I'd picked up the habit of staying late. Something about the silence helped me focus. No meetings, no Slack messages, no coworkers hovering. That night, I had a deadline to meet and decided to power through after everyone else left. I ordered takeout, put on my headphones, and got into the zone. Outside, the city was winding down, but our 10th floor office, quiet, fluorescent, still, felt like its own little world. I thought I was alone. Our office takes up half a floor in a building that's mostly small firms, law offices, tech startups, therapists. After hours, the place goes still, elevators idle, hallways echo. Even the hum of the vending machine feels louder. Around 9:30 p.m., I took a break to stretch my legs. I walked down the corridor, sipping the last of my coffee. The lights in the hall were motion sensor based. Most of them stayed dark as I passed. No reason for them to turn on. I was the only one there. Or so I thought. As I turned the corner past the bathrooms, I caught a flicker of movement in the reflection of the glass door at the end of the hall. Just a shape, brief and blurry, but unmistakably human. A silhouette that didn't match my own. It made me stop mid-step, breath catching in my throat. I turned quickly, scanning both ends of the corridor. Nothing. Silence. Just the echo of my own footsteps and the faint electrical hum of the overhead lights. The hallway stretched empty before me, sterile and still. My eyes lingered on the corners, the closed office doors, the unmoving shadows. I waited a beat longer. Then I laughed. It came out thin, uncertain. Maybe a shadow. Maybe I was just tired. My brain playing tricks on me after too many hours under fluorescent lights. I shook my head, trying to clear the unease, and went back to my desk. I had just settled in, fingers grazing my keyboard, when I heard it. The elevator. A soft ding, sharp in the stillness like the sound didn't belong. I glanced up. It was almost 10 p.m. No one else should be coming in. The elevator doors didn't open right away. I watched the display blink. Floor 3, then 4, then 5. Slowly climbing. My pulse quickened. When it reached 10, the doors slid open. No one stepped out. I waited. Nothing. Then the doors closed again. I told myself maybe someone hit the wrong button, or changed their mind. But my focus was gone. Every creak of the vents made me jump. I packed up around 10:20. The unease hadn't left. As I reached the hallway, I paused, then doubled back and grabbed my metal water bottle, holding it like a club. Just in case. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw it again. A shadow, darting behind the corner at the far end of the hall. I froze. Then I heard footsteps, not mine, coming closer. I turned and ran, not to the elevator, but to the stairwell. My footsteps echoed sharply against the linoleum floors, my breathing already ragged from fear. I reached the stairwell door and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. Locked. I yanked on it again, harder, my other hand slamming against the frame in frustration. The cold metal felt like it bit into my skin. Behind me, the footsteps were getting louder, closer, heavier. No longer the cautious taps of someone sneaking, but deliberate strides. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted me to know they were there. Panic kicked in. I turned and sprinted back toward our office, the hallway stretching longer than I remembered. My bag bounced hard against my side. I fumbled in my coat pocket for the keycard, nearly dropping it. My hand was shaking so badly I missed the reader the first time. The lock beeped. I threw open the door, darted inside, and slammed it shut behind me with a force that made the windows rattle. I locked it. Then I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the handle. And that's when the footsteps stopped, just on the other side. I ducked behind my desk, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I texted a coworker. "Are you still here?" Knowing the answer. I called security. No answer. Then came the knock. Soft, measured, 3 times. Then silence. I waited 10 minutes, 15. Nothing. I crept to the door, pressed my ear against it. Silence. I opened it just a crack. The hallway was empty. I didn't wait. I ran for the elevator, slammed the button over and over. Got in. Held my breath as the doors closed. The next morning, I went to building security. Told them everything. They checked the hallway cameras. They saw me walking, stopping, running. They saw the elevator doors open, but no one ever came out. And the footage showed no one behind me in the hall. No shadow, no person. I don't stay late anymore, not alone. I never got an explanation. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the cameras missed something. But I know what I saw, and I know how it felt. Someone else was there, and they didn't want to be seen. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday. I'd finished work early and decided to stop by the mall before heading home. Nothing fancy, just browsing, maybe grabbing a smoothie, taking some time for myself. It had been a long week. I didn't have anything specific in mind when I walked into the store. It was one of those large department stores with everything from perfume to pajamas. I wandered into the women's section, picking out a couple of tops and a pair of jeans. It felt good to be alone and unhurried for once. I made my way toward the fitting rooms. The fitting rooms were at the back of the store, past several racks of sale items and an empty service counter. A sign told me to wait for assistance, but no one was around. I waited a minute, then called out. Nothing. Eventually, I shrugged and went in anyway. The hallway was quiet. Rows of doors, a long mirror at the end. I picked one of the middle stalls and locked the door behind me. I tried on the first top, then the second. Nothing really worked. The jeans were last. I wriggled into them and checked the fit in the mirror. That's when I heard it. A click. Very soft, like a camera shutter. I froze, my whole body tensing as if someone had poured ice water down my spine. Had I imagined it? Maybe it was a hanger falling or the soft creak of a vent, but something in my gut said otherwise. I held my breath and listened. The store was mostly quiet, the kind of dead silence that comes in big buildings after hours. Then it came again, a soft, distinct click. Not metallic, not loud, just barely audible, like the snap of a phone camera, followed by the faintest scrape of movement on the other side of the door. I crouched down slowly, every instinct screaming at me not to make a sound. My palms were sweating. I bent just enough to peer under the gap at the bottom of the stall. Shoes. Not polished dress shoes like the ones worn by store staff. Not heels. Dirty, worn-out sneakers with the kind of frayed laces that look like they haven't been untied in years. They were pointed straight at my door. Motionless. I stared at them, willing them to move away, but they didn't. I didn't move either. I barely breathed. I could hear the thudding of my heart in my ears. Then another soft click. I knew I wasn't alone. I stood up slowly, trying to keep calm. My phone was in my bag, hanging on the hook. I grabbed it and quietly opened the camera. I hit record. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone out there?" No response. I waited a beat, then unlocked the door and yanked it open hard. A man stumbled back, hood pulled low, phone clutched awkwardly in his hand. His mouth opened, but he said nothing, just stared. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped, holding my phone up to show I was recording. He turned and ran. I yanked on my jacket with shaking hands and ran after him, my phone still recording as I burst out of the fitting room area. My voice cracked as I shouted, the sound echoing off the tiled floor. "Hey, stop him!" I sprinted past the empty service counter, my shoes slapping hard against the linoleum. A couple of shoppers turned, confused, some startled, but most just stared. One woman moved her child closer to her side. He darted around a display rack and crashed through the main doors into the wider mall, knocking over a sign on his way out. I didn't hesitate. I kept chasing, my breath burning in my throat. The gap between us never closed, but I kept him in sight as he weaved through the foot traffic. By the time we reached the food court, more people had noticed the commotion. A security guard standing near the smoothie stand stepped into his path just in time. The man tried to dodge, but the guard lunged, tackling him to the ground with a grunt. His phone flew from his hand on impact. It hit the floor and slid several feet, spinning before coming to a stop just inches from my feet. I stared at it, breathless, chest heaving, knowing what might be inside. Police were called. I gave my statement, handed over the video on my phone. They recovered his device. I watched one of the officers scroll through the gallery. It was filled with photos taken under fitting room doors. Not just of me, other women, girls, some clearly from other stores, other days. I felt sick. They told me he'd done this before, but had never been caught in the act. Always vanished before anyone could confront him. This time, he wouldn't be walking away. The mall banned him permanently. Charges were filed. They said he'd likely face jail time. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I hadn't heard the sound? What if I hadn't spoken up? What if he'd followed someone younger? Someone too scared to react? I still think about that moment. Seeing his shoes, the silence, the cold grip of fear. Now I only try on clothes at home. If I absolutely have to use a fitting room, I check everything. Walls, floors, mirrors. I bring a friend if I can. It's exhausting. But I can't unfeel what I felt. I can't unsee what I saw on that phone screen. I posted about it anonymously, not for attention, but to warn others. I got dozens of replies. Other women, same story, different malls, same fear. I realized how common this is, and how rare it is that someone actually gets caught. So if something feels wrong, say something. Loudly. Clearly. Because staying quiet never stops them. Being seen does. I took the trip to get away. Not for anything dramatic. No heartbreak, no crisis. Just the slow erosion of routine. Work had become static. My apartment felt smaller each week. My phone never rang unless it was spam. So I booked a solo weekend at a rental cabin upstate near a lake I'd never heard of, Lake Merrow. The place looked untouched. Quiet, glassy water and thick woods that wrapped around the shoreline. The rental listing mentioned excellent fishing and limited cell service. That sealed it for me. The cabin sat a few hundred yards off the dirt access road, nestled deep among tall, swaying pines. The air smelled like sap and damp earth, and the gravel crunched softly under my tires as I pulled up. It looked exactly like the listing photos. Weathered wood siding, a green tin roof, and an old brass lantern hanging by the front door. Rustic but well cared for, with just enough wear to make it feel lived in rather than staged. No TV, no Wi-Fi, no sound except the wind through the trees and the occasional creak of the porch steps. Inside was simple: a wood stove in the corner, a shelf of old paperbacks, and a single window that framed the lake like a painting. The screened porch overlooked the dock, which stretched out into the mirror-still water like a finger pointing to nowhere. It was perfect. I took my time unpacking, set my duffel bag down, stocked the fridge with a 6-pack, unzipped the tackle box like I was settling into a ritual I hadn't performed in years. I pulled on my old fishing boots, the soles cracked but familiar. The lake was quiet, no boats, no swimmers, not even the buzz of motor traffic in the distance. Just the slow glide of a dragonfly and the occasional plop of something beneath the surface. The water shimmered with a glassy stillness, broken only by faint ripples that lapped against the dock like a whisper. By evening, I had a line in the water and a folding chair at the edge of the dock. I leaned back, beer in hand, and stared out across the lake. The silence was heavier than I expected, dense, like it had weight. It pressed against my ears and settled into my chest. And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely alone. The nearest town, about 20 minutes away, had a single diner and a bait shop. The man behind the counter looked up when I asked about Lake Merrow. "You're out there alone?" he asked. "Yeah, cabin rental." He hesitated, then rang up my supplies. "Don't go past the inlet," he said. "Fishing's no good beyond that." I asked why. He just shrugged. "Old local thing." I found the inlet the next day, narrow, shaded by thick brush. The water darkened noticeably as it curved beyond sight. Something about it unsettled me. I stuck to the main body of the lake. Still, the fish were scarce, not even a nibble. I moved along the shore, casting from different spots. Late afternoon, I found a trail that led around the inlet. I told myself I was just exploring. The trail ended at a crumbling boat launch. Half-sunken logs floated in the shallows. A rotting canoe rested upside down nearby, but something was off. No birds, no insects. Even the breeze seemed to stop. The air felt heavy. Still, I cast my line. Within seconds, something bit, hard. I yanked back, line snapped. Heart pounding, I re-rigged and cast again. Another hit, another break. I never saw what took them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, just a feeling. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a splash, then another, rhythmic, like someone waiting, getting closer. I stood at the window, looking out at the lake, nothing but ripples. In the morning, the dock was wet, not from rain. I hiked back to the far side, sun high, nerves steady. The rotting canoe was gone. In its place, boot prints, deep, barely dry. They led into the water, then stopped. No return trail. That evening, while pulling in my line, I noticed a figure on the far shore. It took a second for my eyes to adjust. Long shadows were stretching across the lake, the water reflecting orange and purple as the sun dipped behind the tree line. They were standing just beyond the trees, near where the rotting canoe had been. Perfectly still, arms at their sides, head angled slightly downward, like they were studying me. I squinted, trying to make out details, but the low light and distance made them blur into the shadows. I raised my hand and gave a tentative wave. They didn't move, not even a twitch. I glanced down to reel in the slack from my line, just a second, and when I looked back up, the shoreline was empty. No movement, no splash, just empty trees and darkening water. I packed up early, the line still wet in my hands. I woke to tapping on the cabin window. Not hard, just enough to wake me. When I opened the curtains, there was nothing there, but wet boot prints led from the water to my porch. I left that morning, didn't look back. When I told the bait shop guy, he just nodded. Some places don't like to be visited. Back in the city, I checked the lake on Google Maps. It was there, but no roads led to the far side, and no records of any cabins near the inlet. Just water, and trees, and silence. It was just past midnight when I pulled into the lot. The diner was one of those old, chrome-sided places off the highway, Betty's 24-hour grill. I'd passed it 100 times on late-night drives, but never stopped before. That night, I was too tired to keep going, too wired to sleep. The parking lot was nearly empty. One truck, one sedan. I slid into a spot near the door. Neon lights buzzed above the windows. Open all night flickered in tired red letters. I needed coffee, maybe a slice of pie. Inside, the place was warmer than I expected, a stark contrast to the cool spring air outside. The scent hit me immediately. Burnt toast, fryer oil, and old coffee. Thick and familiar, like a coat you hadn't meant to wear. The booths were red vinyl, some torn and patched with duct tape. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a slightly sickly yellow glow. There were only 2 other customers. A man sat alone in the farthest booth, his shoulders hunched, staring into a mug like he'd been nursing it for hours. His jacket was zipped to his neck, despite the heat. At the counter sat a woman in a faded denim jacket, flipping lazily through a wrinkled tabloid, occasionally tucking strands of silver hair behind her ears. The waitress looked up from behind the counter. She looked like she'd been working the graveyard shift for decades. Faint crow's feet, the kind smile of someone who's seen it all. "Sit anywhere you like, hon," she said, her voice scratchy but kind. I chose a booth by the window, sliding in and glancing out at the empty parking lot before she appeared a moment later with a mug of coffee. She set it down without asking. "You look like you've had a long night." I gave a tired smile. "Something like that." She gave a nod, a small one that felt like understanding more than agreement, and shuffled back to her station without another word. I sipped the coffee. It was bad, but hot. Outside, the highway was empty. A few moths battered themselves against the glass. The man in the booth hadn't moved, not once. Just sat there hunched over, his drink untouched. The woman at the counter laughed at something in her magazine, then got up, left a few dollars, and walked out. That left me, the man, and the waitress. It got quieter, more still, like the whole place was holding its breath. The man finally moved. He looked up, his eyes met mine, and he smiled. Something in that smile chilled me. Too wide, too sudden, like it wasn't meant to be seen. Then he stood, slowly, reached into his coat and dropped a few bills on the table. I looked away, trying to act like I hadn't been watching. When I glanced back, he wasn't walking toward the exit. He was walking toward me. He stopped at my booth, "Mind if I sit?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost pleasant, but it didn't match his eyes. I hesitated, then shook my head. "I'm good, thanks." He didn't move. "You sure? You look like someone who could use company." "I'm fine." The waitress appeared beside us, eyes on him. "Problem here?" she asked. He smiled again. "No, ma'am, just being friendly." He walked out a moment later, but he didn't drive away. I finished my coffee and tried to calm down. Told myself I was overreacting. The guy was probably harmless, but when I stepped outside, I saw his truck, still there, engine off, no headlights. He was sitting inside, watching. I got into my car quickly and locked the doors. Started the engine, pulled out of the lot. He followed. I took a turn I didn't need to take. He took it too. I changed lanes, he matched me. I sped up. So did he. My heart pounded. I didn't want to go home, didn't want him to know where I lived. So I drove toward a gas station near the interstate. Bright lights, cameras, people. He stayed behind me the whole way. I pulled into the gas station fast, tires screeching slightly as I swung the car into a sharp turn and nearly clipped the pump. The lights above the station were blindingly bright compared to the road I'd just left behind. I slammed the gear into park and jumped out, leaving the engine running as I dashed inside. The clerk, a teenager with earbuds dangling from his hoodie, looked up in confusion as the door slammed behind me. I rushed to the counter, breathless, voice trembling. "Someone's following me," I said. "He's out there, in a black truck." The clerk leaned forward, peering past me through the windows. "Where?" I turned. The man's truck had rolled to a slow stop near the edge of the lot, just beyond the pumps. The headlights were still off. The silhouette of his head was barely visible behind the windshield, but I knew he was looking straight at us. The clerk nodded and reached under the counter for the phone. "I'll call the cops. Stay in here." I paced near the cold drinks, glancing outside every few seconds. The truck didn't move, just idled in place, lights off, engine rumbling. Minutes felt like hours. Then, 10 minutes later, just as the sirens started to echo in the distance, the truck pulled away slowly, casually, like he'd never been there for me at all. I filed a report. They took my statement, looked at the footage. His plates were fake. Truck was stolen. He hadn't bought anything at the diner, just sat, waited. No one had seen him before. I still drive that stretch of highway sometimes, but I make sure I'm through before sundown. No more late night stops, no more empty parking lots or flickering neon signs. Not alone. I think about that night more than I want to admit, how quiet he was, how calm, how easy it was for someone like him to blend in, to wait for someone like me. It wasn't hunger in his eyes, not for pie, not for coffee, something colder, sharper, predatory. I got lucky, not everyone does. When I first pulled into the town of Merrow Ridge, I was exhausted. Not just from the long drive, but from everything I was leaving behind. My name is Emily Warner. I'm 27, and I just signed a lease on a modest white house at the edge of town, trying to start over after years of city noise and a job that drained the life out of me. The town was small, too small for stoplights, with one diner, one gas station, and a public library that closed by 5, but the quiet appealed to me. The people I passed on the street smiled and nodded. It felt safe, or at least safer than where I came from. My new house sat on a hill, slightly overgrown, with a long gravel driveway and thick trees on either side. It had charm, faded shutters, a creaky porch swing, and the smell of pine in the air. It was exactly what I needed. The first few days passed quietly enough. I unpacked methodically, labeling boxes, wiping out drawers, and making mental notes of what needed repairs. The roof creaked a little too much in the wind. The bathroom faucet dripped in a rhythm I couldn't tune out. Still, it felt manageable. The neighbors kept to themselves. An older couple down the hill nodded politely when I passed with groceries. Across the road, I saw a man washing his truck, but he never looked up. The mailman, Dennis, waved every morning like clockwork, cheerful but brief. It wasn't warm, exactly, but it wasn't cold either. One afternoon, I wandered into the woods behind the house and stumbled upon a narrow hiking trail. It wound through pine trees and opened to a hidden overlook of the lake, calm and silver blue under the sky. It was the kind of spot you'd expect in a postcard, completely still, untouched. But at night, things shifted. It started small. The porch light flickered, then went out. I replaced the bulb, but it flickered again the next night. Once, I came downstairs to find the front door slightly ajar. I could have sworn I'd locked it before bed. Another time, I noticed my kitchen window wide open. The screen was still in place, untouched. I told myself it was nerves, moving stress. Maybe I was forgetting things in my haze of exhaustion, but it kept happening. Always just enough to make me pause, to make me wonder. The sense of being watched crept in slowly, like mist curling under a doorframe. And once it arrived, it didn't leave. It wasn't until I visited the town library that I learned about the house's past. The librarian, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, seemed surprised when I told her my address. "That place has been empty for years," she said. "Last tenant left in a hurry. Didn't even take her things." I asked why, but she just shook her head. "You should ask Sheriff Denton. He'll know more than I do." I did, but when I brought it up, the sheriff gave me a careful look and told me to make sure I kept my doors locked. Nothing else. The strange events kept coming. Every morning I'd find something moved, subtle, deliberate. A mug turned around, a drawer cracked open. One night I found my bedroom closet light on. I never turned it on. I bought a small security camera for my living room, just to ease my mind. The first 2 nights, nothing. The third night, at 2:41 a.m., the video cut out for exactly 1 minute. When it resumed, my front door, locked before, was wide open. I started checking outside every morning. On the 6th day, I found footprints in the dew-covered grass. They led from the woods behind the house to the back door. Only one set. No prints leading back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with a kitchen knife in one hand and my phone in the other, though I knew no one would come fast enough. One afternoon, I came back from the grocery store and immediately sensed something was off. The air inside the house felt colder, heavier, like it hadn't been empty while I was gone. As I set the paper bags on the counter, I noticed it. The basement door, which I always kept locked, was slightly ajar. Just enough to see the edge of the frame and the darkness beyond. My stomach dropped. I never used the basement. The landlord mentioned it was unfinished, prone to moisture, nothing worth seeing. I had no reason to go down there, and I certainly hadn't left it open. I approached slowly, each step creaking under my weight. I pushed the door fully open, heart in my throat. The single bulb above the stairwell had burned out. The steps descended into a thick, absolute blackness that swallowed the light from the hallway behind me. The air that drifted up was cold and stale, like a place long sealed. I stared for a moment, waiting for my eyes to adjust, but there was nothing to see. Just the void. I closed the door carefully, turned the lock, then dragged a chair in front of it. That night, I was almost asleep when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Soft, deliberate. Just 3. It came from downstairs. Then silence. I finally called the sheriff. He walked the property. Didn't find much. No prints this time. No signs of forced entry. He suggested maybe I was imagining it. Stress, he said, but I knew better. The camera caught something again. Not a face. Just a shape, low to the ground, moving fast across the floor. I left the next morning before the sun came up. There was no packing. Just a frenzied sweep of the house. Phone, charger, wallet, keys, before I tossed everything into the passenger seat and started the engine with shaking hands. I didn't stop to lock the door. I didn't look back at the porch, or the trees lining the driveway, or the chair still wedged under the basement knob. I just drove. I called the sheriff twice on the way out of town. Both times it went to voicemail. No callback ever came. When I reached the library intending to thank Margaret for her help, I found someone else behind the counter, a younger woman, cheerful, unfamiliar. I asked about Margaret. Her smile faltered. "There's no one by that name here," she said. "I've worked here 3 years. I'd know." My stomach dropped. I didn't argue. Back at a motel 2 towns over, I pulled up county records on my laptop. I searched the address, the street, the entire block. Nothing. The house on Sycamore Hill wasn't listed. No deed, no previous owner, no utility records. It was as if it had never existed. But I remember the stairs, the cold air, the door creaking open on its own. And most of all, I remember the knock. Soft, 3 times, then silence. My name is Daniel Reese. I'm 32, work in IT support at a mid-size firm, and I run 5 miles almost every night without fail. Running keeps my head clear. It's the one part of the day that feels truly mine. After 8 hours behind a desk troubleshooting ticket after ticket, and 3 more hours stuck in traffic that crawls like a dying animal, pounding the pavement is the only thing that doesn't feel artificial. The rhythm of my feet, the steady pulse in my ears, the way my breath matches my stride. It's like meditation in motion. I run the same route every time. It starts at my apartment in a quiet suburb just east of Indianapolis. I head down Sycamore Lane, cut across the pedestrian bridge over Lake Concord, loop the trail that circles the water, then wind through Maple Street with its aging oaks and wide, cracked sidewalks. I pass the rusted gates of the old rail yard, abandoned, fenced off, but still looming. And then I'm home again. It's a route carved into muscle memory. Same uneven sidewalk near the bookstore. Same flickering street lamp near the 7-Eleven that buzzes like it's shorting out. Same row of houses with warm blue light glowing through curtains like the families inside are frozen in time. It's always the same. Every night. Until it wasn't. The suburb I live in, Clearwater Ridge, is clean and quiet. Families with tidy lawns, cars that are always washed, and sprinklers that hiss in rhythm. It's the kind of place where nothing happens, where everything is supposed to be safe. I've lived here 4 years, long enough to recognize every porch light and every dog behind every fence, long enough to know when something doesn't fit. It started with a house on Milner Drive. Lights always off, no cars in the driveway, grass just long enough to look wrong, a mailbox stuffed full of flyers and grocery coupons. Nobody ever came in. Nobody ever left. And then one night, someone was standing in the yard. I was halfway through my run when I saw them, standing perfectly still in the middle of the lawn. Too tall, too thin. I slowed, then stopped across the street. They didn't move, no phone in hand, no dog leash, just standing there, facing the house. I crossed to the other sidewalk and picked up my pace. I didn't look back. After that, things shifted. I started noticing small differences along my route. Streetlights that never turned on. Cars I'd never seen parked for days in the same spot. Trash bins put out on the wrong days. The kind of stuff that only stands out when you run the same loop every day. And the house on Milner? Now there was light in one of the windows. Always the same window. Always dim. Flickering like a candle or an old TV. Once, I saw the curtain move. It was a Wednesday night. I was rounding the curve near the old rail yard when I saw him. A man. Standing on the sidewalk, not walking, just waiting. I slowed. He was facing me. Hood up, hands in pockets. His shoes were wrong, bare feet in sneakers with no laces. As I passed, he said, "Why do you always run the same path?" I didn't answer, just kept running. But I didn't hear him step away. That week, I switched routes. Different directions, new neighborhoods, later times. But he was still there. Not every night, but often enough. Always watching. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. Always still. I started using my phone to record parts of my run, just in case. One night, I played it back. At the edge of the frame, blurry in the background, he was there, smiling. I made a mistake. I stopped in front of the house on Milner Drive, something I swore I wouldn't do. But curiosity had gnawed at me for weeks, and that night, it finally won. The air was unusually still. Even the cicadas had gone quiet. The grass in the yard was knee-high, brittle under the streetlight. It rustled like paper when I stepped onto the path. I walked up the uneven driveway slowly, phone in hand, camera already recording. The silence felt thick, like sound had been drained from the space around me. The front door was slightly open, not swinging, just cracked wide enough to suggest an invitation. Or a warning. I hesitated. I should have turned back. Everything in me said to leave, but I didn't. I stepped inside. The air was stale and metallic, like rust and mold had been left to fester in a sealed box. The furniture, though minimal, was draped in yellowing white sheets. The outlines beneath them suggested someone had once cared about arrangement. A couch angled toward a fireplace, a side table beside it, a shelf with family photos, faces turned down. The TV was on. Not a show, not even a blue screen, just full static, casting a pale glow over the room like a broken lighthouse. A single wooden chair sat directly in front of it, centered, as if someone had been watching for a long time, or waiting. I slowly turned to leave, the floor groaning beneath each step. Then the door slammed shut behind me, so hard the walls seemed to exhale. And I wasn't sure anymore that I was alone. I ran, through the back, into the alley, across 3 yards. Didn't stop until I reached the Walgreens on 10th. I called the police, gave them the address, waited. They found nothing. No open door, no static TV, no sheets. They told me the house had been vacant for over a year. I don't run anymore. But I still walk. I try to keep moving, and sometimes I feel like I'm still being watched. This morning, I checked my running app. A new route was listed. 9 miles, drawn into a loop, starting and ending at my front door. I didn't run it, but someone did, and they left their shoes on my porch.